Hello, and welcome to today's presentation, Sophos Endpoint, delivering better security outcomes for real-world organizations. My name is Matthew Hickey, Vice President of Solutions Engineering at Sophos. Normally, when I do a presentation, I kind of like to set the table of what we're seeing in the cybersecurity landscape. And every time I kind of rip from the headlines some recent things that have happened across the news, and I think we've all paid attention to the latest attacks that have occurred. MGM Hotels was hit with a ransomware attack, but they weren't the only ones in the gambling industry, because prior to that attack, Caesars Entertainment paid $15 million of ransomware. And of course, we saw that Clorox was reeling from a cyber attack that had really affected their quarterly earnings. So if you were to tell me 15 years ago, when this ransomware first reared its ugly head, that we'd still be talking about that as a major threat to corporate and IT systems, I'd be shocked. But that being said, it's here and it's here to stay. And we see the ransomware attacks increasing. And ransomware attacks have increased in volume over the last year, and the repercussions are widespread. 66% of our respondents in a state of ransomware survey reported that their organizations were hit by ransomware in the previous year, a 78% increase from the previous year. In nearly 2/3 of these incidents, attackers encrypted data. Yet overall, the average cost to remediate a ransomware attack was a business-crippling $1.4 million. Furthermore, 90% of those victims said a ransomware attack impacted their ability to operate, while 86% of the private sector organizations said it caused them to lose business or revenue. The growth in ransomware incidents was part of a broader cyber threat, and 72% of the respondents of the survey increased the volume and complexity impact of cyber attacks over that last year. A properly configured endpoint protection solution represents one of the most effective methods to defend against this attack. What we will talk about today is how best practices of deploying your solution and how to prevent these types of attacks with good IT hygiene and additional layers of security. But first, let's dig a little bit deeper into what the threat out there. What we saw is that we've seen a trend over the past couple of years with the red alert and the variant, the N13V variant, which encrypts both Windows and Linux ESX servers. So they're not just targeting Windows anymore, but Linux is becoming a popular target. And we've also noticed that a Lockbit variant targeted ESX servers. Why, you might ask? Well, these hypervisors have a capability of hosting hundreds of servers. Imagine the impact to an organization if they can hold one of these captives. We've also seen some ransomware groups have embraced the use of new programming language in an effort to make detection more difficult, to make the ransomware executables more easily compiled to run under different operating systems or platforms, and simply because the people developing these malware payloads bring these skills and tools to that effort. We've seen an increase in the Rust programming language has been adopted by developers of the Black Cat and Hive ransomware, while Blackbyte's malware is written with the Go language. So they're using this more to obfuscate the code that's out there and get around existing protections that are deployed. And when it comes to delivering and spreading their malware, ransomware operatives continue to evolve. The trend that we've seen is that they're holding data it's not more like encrypting data, but they're actually holding data as extortion and as a release of this data. And they're also developing really more innovative extortion methods. They're selling stolen data through a subscription model, which is adopting software as a service type of model as well, or they're auctioning off the stolen data to the highest criminal bidder. So when it comes to innovation, Lockbit led the pack. These threat actors are functioning like legitimate software services, offering bug bounty programs, a menu of service offerings. Lockbit's new bug bounty program offers rewards between $1,000 to $1 million for a variety of activities, from finding bugs in its malware to ideas for improving operations. Lockbit also offers its victims the chance to purchase or destroy the stolen data or extend the time the data is leaked. So they're actually expanding and being very flexible in their offerings, but in all, the ultimate goal is to get more money. This is a little bit dated, but what we saw in 2022 is that the most prevalent ransomware encountered by Sophos Rapid Response was Lockbit, followed by Black Hat. The most prevalent ransomware in Sophos Rapid Response engagements during the first 10 months of 2022, so again, it's from 2022, was the Lockbit. However, the other accounted for over 1/5 of the families noted, indicating that the ransomware landscape is by no means limited to just a few high-profile families. There are many ransomware actors and many types of ransomware attacks. Some are highly targeted, while others are more opportunistic. Often, adversaries scan networks looking for weaknesses that will allow them access. Consider this quote from a ransomware gang that attacked a Canadian education organization. This quote also highlights the common exploitation of unpatched vulnerabilities by adversaries, which was the #1 method of entry used in cyber attacks. Ransomware as a service. Much of the recent increase of the volume of ransomware attacks can be attributed to the growing ransomware as a service model. There's been a shift from threat actors who make ransomware and use it to attack organizations using this model. With ransomware as a service, a cybercrime gang group builds ransomware and leases it out to the attackers. This approach lowers the barrier of entry, making ransomware accessible to the greater number of adversaries than before. Once adversaries are inside their victims' environments, they often spread many days, weeks, or months exploring the network, escalating privileges, exfiltrating data, and installing malware. Now, I once had a conversation with a customer, and when I mentioned ransomware, said he was not really concerned with ransomware. He was more concerned with breaches. But you have to remember that typically a ransomware attack is the last attack a user will do on the network. If you've been attacked by ransomware, most likely exfiltration has occurred on your network, so you have to treat it like a breach event. As moving forward, we'll take a look at what a typical ransomware attack looks like. So a typical targeted ransomware attack might look like this. First of all, they gain entry via an exploitation of a vulnerability in an unpatched software, malware such as Emotet or TrickBot, phishing attempts. The next step is they'll escalate the privileges until they are an administrator. Attackers exploit system vulnerabilities to gain privilege levels that let them bypass security software. They attempt to disable or bypass security software using highly tailored files. Failing this, they will attempt to breach the Security Management Council and disable security systems. And we've seen multiple times where an administrator's system has been compromised. And in doing so, they were actually able to gain password access and administrative access to administrative tools. So this is why it's really important to deploy multi-factor authentication type of technologies. The next thing they will do is deploy the ransomware that encrypts the victim's files. Hackers use network and host vulnerabilities or basic file sharing protocols to compromise other systems on the networks. They also utilize tools that companies already use in the network, such as PSExec and PowerShell. And of course, what they'll do too is leave a ransom note demanding payment and the directions for files in order to get their files back. And then what they'll do is wait for the victim to contact them via email or the dark web website. And this is the evolution of ransomware. It really hasn't changed, but it just gives you an idea of the multiple steps that are involved in a typical targeted attack. What we've also seen is that the remote desktop protocol played a major part in a lot of the cyber attacks investigated by Sophos incident response team. RDP and desktop sharing tools like virtual network computing, or VNC, or commonly known as VNC, are legitimate and highly used features that allow administrators to access and manage systems remotely. Unfortunately, without proper safeguards, ransomware actors commonly exploit these tools. Interesting how attacks are using RDP is changing. Most of the incidents investigated by Sophos, RDP was only used for internal access and lateral movement. So that's once they get inside the network, they're leveraging that tool to move laterally within your network. Meanwhile, RDP was used for external access only 1% of the cases. And quite honestly, I think this is mostly due to good hygiene from these network administrators. No longer are they allowing RDP access to the internet. So what usually happens is that, and what we've seen in the previous is that they had a terminal server deployed, they take it inside the network and think they're safe, and they forget that they still need to protect it from the attack to limit lateral access. While we're still on the topic of RDP, let me walk you through a recent attack that a Sophos incident responders were brought to remediate. This is an automotive supplier was hit with 3 separate ransomware attacks. All 3 threat actors abused the same misconfiguration. a firewall rule exposing RDP on a management server, but used different ransomware strains and tactics. The first ransomware group, identified as Lockbit, exfiltrated data to the Mega Cloud storage service using Mimikatz to extract passwords, and distributed the ransomware binary using PSExec. That's it's a legitimate tool, but a tool that you could actually mitigate or limit access to specific users. Then a second group, identified as Hive, used RDP for a second time. This time, the move laterally before dropping the ransomware just 2 hours after the Lockbit threat actors. Now, as the victim restored data from backup, an affiliate accessed the network, installed a Terra agent, which is a legitimate access tool, to establish persistence and exfiltrated data. 2 weeks after the Lockbit and Hive attacks, the threat actor distributed the ransomware and cleared the Windows event logs. As well as creating an ongoing nightmare for this victim, the story illustrates some of the ways cyber attacks have evolved and the importance of locking down RDP or other remote management tools. So let's take a look at the best practices for securing your security solution. Alongside security solution, using an endpoint security or extended detection and response, known as XDR in the industry, solution that includes advanced prevention technology and threat hunting capabilities is one of the most effective methods for protecting against ransomware attacks. However, these techniques do provide maximum cyber protection. They need to be configured correctly. We therefore recommend these 7 best practices to protect your endpoint devices from ransomware. Number 1, use the default policy recommendations set out by the vendor and ensure all features are enabled. It sounds obvious, but this is a surefire way to get the best protection from your endpoint solution. Policies are designed to stop specific threats, and the regular checking that all protection options are enabled ensures your endpoints are protected against the current and emerging ransomware. Keep in mind too, is that no longer can we live in an endpoint solution where it's set and forget. We always want to make sure to stay on top of our configurations, and when it comes to endpoint security, stay on top of our exclusions as well. And make sure you set up specific guardrails so that you don't get off the trail of actually those good configurations. Additionally, we recommend that you enable tamper protection because, as I mentioned before, once they get access to a specific system, the first thing they're going to look to do is disable that system. So make sure that tamper protection is enabled and that it's protected as well. Enable forensic logging, ideally offsite as well, so it's additional protected. So not in the current system or not in a system that they can move laterally to if they get access. If you do get compromised, you will want to know what happened. However, most data won't be available since attackers often wipe system logs to cover their tracks. You may lose access to your device, having a record of activity in the cloud, such as a data lake. Sophos has a data lake included with their XDR solution, and it ensures that you retain the access to the important information. In addition, enable features that detect fileless attack techniques and ransomware behaviors to stop criminals from infiltrating your endpoints and deploying harmful ransomware strains. If you're a Sophos customer, managing these endpoint protections through Sophos Central can achieve some of this using the Account Health Check tool. So some of the things we're talking about specifically applies to your Sophos endpoint. This is a feature that was rolled out last year, and it's a Sophos Account Health Check feature. It enables you to quickly identify and address configuration issues with your Sophos protected devices. This maximizes your defenses. This is available to everyone, to all Sophos customers out there managing their Sophos endpoint and server security through the Sophos Central platform. It has a number of key checks. So first of all, it's going to check your software assignment. So do all of your devices that are out there have the right software assigned to them? It'll check your threat policy. Are policies using recommended settings? It will show your exclusions. Are any exclusions creating significant exposure? You won't believe how many customers I've run into that had a star on their C drive for exclusions, meaning it really wasn't doing any work at all. And also make sure tamper protection has not been disabled on that system. While recommended settings are automatically applied with all new Sophos deployments, over time, issues can develop as devices are added and removed. Also, if you have multiple administrators in there trying to create exclusions to do application troubleshooting, things of that nature, I've seen this happen as well, as we haven't gone back to a good configuration. We understand that teams change, administrators change. But we would recommend customers review the health check at least every 3 months to maintain a healthy environment. Number two, regularly review your exclusions. This is the biggest thing we've seen with a lot of our deployments. Exclusions prevent trustworthy directories and file types from being scanned for malware. They are sometimes used to reduce system delays and minimize the risk of false positives. What we have seen over time is that drift. It's that security drift of growing a list of excluded directories and file types that can impact many people across the network. Malware that manages to make its way to excluded directories, perhaps accidentally by the user, likely execution will be successful. Regularly check your list of exclusions within your threat protection settings and limit the number of exclusions as possible. For any you can't remove, make sure they are specific as possible. And don't exclude, rather than excluding an entire database directory or drive, only exclude specific files with their full path. This prevents malware from bypassing your security and running from the same folder. 3, enable multi-factor authentication. I can't emphasize this enough. I've seen multiple occasions where an administrator's account was activated because MFA wasn't enabled. Now, this is a default behavior now of Sophos Central, but this is a good behavior on any of your security solutions. MFA provides an additional layer of security after the first factor, which is often a password. Enabling MFA across your applications is critical for all users, especially those who have access to Security Console. Doing so ensures access to your endpoint protection solution is secure and not prone to accidental or deliberate attempts to change your settings that could otherwise leave your endpoint devices vulnerable to attacks. MFA is also critical to secure RDP. 4th, ensure every endpoint is protected and up to date. Check your devices regularly to find out if they're protected and up to date. If a device is not functioning correctly, they may not be protected and could be vulnerable to a ransomware attack or other attacks. Endpoint security tools often provide this telemetry, and a healthy IT maintenance program is also helpful for regularly checking for any potential IT issues. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll probably say again, is that endpoint security was thought to be a set and forget type of technology. We're no longer in that paradigm. And maintain good IT hygiene. IT or cyber hygiene is a reference to the measure that users of computers and other devices take to maintain system health and improve online security. Regularly evaluating your IT hygiene ensures your endpoints and the software installed them run at peak efficiency. This mitigates your cybersecurity risk and can save you time when you remediate future incidents. Implementing a program to maintain IT hygiene is especially critical for safeguarding against ransomware attacks and other cybersecurity threats. For example, ensure RDP is running only where you need it and expect it. Regularly check for configuration issues, monitor device performance, and remove unwanted or unneeded programs. An IT hygiene check may highlight the need to update software applications, including your security software. And it's a surefire way to ensure your data backup is done regularly. And this is a relatively newer concept. When I say newer, probably within the last 5 years, but it's more of getting off your back foot and getting on your front foot when you're protecting your infrastructure. And it's proactively hunting for active adversaries across your network. When we're talking about cybersecurity and protecting our networks and protecting a breach, we always talk about dwell time. How long has the attacker been in a network before they've been identified? So try to be proactive with this. In today's threat landscape, malicious actors are more clever than ever. After deploying legitimate tools and stolen credentials to avoid detection, they identify these what we call living off the lands of attacks. It's essentially proactively hunt for advanced threats and active adversaries. Once found, you will need to be able to take appropriate actions to quickly stop them. Endpoint technologies as endpoint detection and response and extended detection and response, what we call them EDR and XDR, provide threat hunting and neutralization. Organization of these technologies should take full advantage of them. So what you have to do is ask yourself, how much time am I dedicating on a weekly basis to these proactive hunts? How am I doing these? Am I doing it efficiently? Many organizations struggle to maintain round-the-clock coverage to defend against advanced ransomware attacks. That's why managed detection and response, MDR services, are key. MDR services, like the ones that Sophos provide 24/7 threat hunting delivered by experts who specialize in detecting and responding to cyber attacks that technology solutions cannot alone prevent. They also provide the highest level of protection against advanced human-led ransomware attacks. So let's take you through a case study. Again, this is right from the front lines from our MDR SOC. As investigated by the Sophos MDR team, this case is a great example of how a threat hunt can uncover the unexpected. In this case, a customer got in touch to say that a vendor they had worked with had been hit by ransomware. So this customer has not been hit, but somewhere in their supply chain has been, and they wanted additional assistance to make sure that they were protected as well. So the Sophos MDR team got to work. They started investigating immediately, working with our experts in Sophos Labs, now referenced as Sophos XOps, and quickly realized there was no evidence of ransomware at all. At this point, some teams might have closed the case and moved on to other work. However, the Sophos MDR team continued to investigate it and uncovered a historic banking Trojan. The customer was relaxed knowing that they haven't been affected by ransomware and that historic banking malware had been fully removed, an outcome that wouldn't have come to fruition without this proactive hunting. And as the story shows, while ransomware is often the threat that is in the front of mind, it's essential also be to alert the attacks that prefer to hide in the shadows. Within 2 hours and 6 minutes, the whole incident had been investigated and cleaned up. And this example demonstrates of many reasons why Sophos MDR is trusted by over 12,000 organizations across the globe. We'll talk a little bit more about what Sophos can do to support your threat hunting objectives a little later in this presentation. So let's talk about, we talked about previous guidance. The previous guidance focused on optimizing technologies to provide optimal protection. However, staying secure against ransomware requires more than just having the latest technology security solutions. Good IT security practice, including regular employee training, are essential as well. Make sure you're following these 9 best practices. First of all, patch early and often. The exploitation of unpatched vulnerabilities was the root cause for almost half of cyber incidents that we investigated in the last year. Malware often relies on security bugs in popular applications that earlier you patch your endpoints and servers and applications, the fewer holes the cyber criminals can exploit. A statistic that hasn't changed in the past 6 years that we've kept the stat is that between a known vulnerability being released and to when you're patching a server within your network is around 120 days. That's a very large window of opportunity for an active adversary, for a malicious user. And this is something to keep on is that we need to patch early and often and keep a track of that as well. Number 2, back up regularly and keep a recent backup copy offline and offsite. In our State of Ransomware 2022 survey, 73% of IT managers whose data was encrypted were able to restore it from using backups. Encrypt your backup data and keep it offline and offsite so you don't have to worry about the cloud backups or storage devices falling into the wrong hands. 3, enable file extensions. The default window setting is to hide file extensions, meaning that you must rely on thumbnails to identify them. Enable extensions to make sure it's easier to spot JavaScript files and other file types that aren't commonly set to you and yours. Open JS files in Notepad. So opening a JS file in Notepad blocks it from running any malicious scripts and allows you to examine the file's contents. And number 5, don't enable macros in a document attachments received via email. Microsoft deliberately turned off auto execution of macros by default many years ago as a security measure. Many infections rely on persuading you to turn macros back on, so don't do it. Number 6, be cautious about unsolicited attachments. Cyber criminals often rely on age-old dilemma, knowing that you shouldn't open a document until you are sure it's legitimate, but not being able to tell if it's malicious until you open it. When in doubt, leave it out. Number 7, monitor your administrative rights. Constantly reviewing local and domain admin rights, who has them and remove those who don't need them. Don't stay logged in as administrator any longer than necessary, and avoid browsing open documents or performing other regular work duties while you have admin rights. Number 8, regulate internal and external network access. Don't leave network ports exposed. We've saw better IT hygiene behavior with the access of RDP servers, but lock down your organization's RDP access and make sure that server is patched as well. Also, use two-factor authentication on these servers because these are used almost exclusively now when we see people moving laterally within an attack as well. And of course, use strong passwords. It sounds trivial, but it isn't. A weak and predictable password can give your hackers access to your entire network in seconds. We recommend making passwords unique and having them consist of 12 characters, and of course, using a mix of upper and lowercase and random letters as well. So how can Sophos help? So we offer multi-layered threat protection technology. Of course, Sophos endpoint protection with Sophos Intercept X, endpoints detects and stops 99.98% of the attacks before they can run. And that's the key. We want to make sure to stop the attack before it runs. Anti-ransomware behavior technology that detects is included with something called CryptoGuard. And we have anti-exploit capabilities that detect fileless attack techniques. And then all behind the curtain is an AI-powered deep learning models that identify and block ransomware before it can be run. As we mentioned early on, the built-in account health tool automatically assesses your account configuration to identify potential security gaps, such as policies that are not turned on or features that are not enabled. It also provides a practical guidance to remediating any issues found to optimize your cybersecurity protection. Sophos XDR provides professional-grade tools that enable you to hunt for threats within your environment and provide good IT hygiene. It empowers your team to ask detailed questions to identify advanced threats, active adversaries, unprotected devices, and potential IT vulnerabilities to quickly stop them. Sophos XDR or XDR tools allow us to get off our back foot and be reactive to attacks. It allows us to get proactive and get advanced attacks to find out what's going on in my network. With access to live device data up to 90 days of on-disk data, we also include with Sophos 30 days of data stored in the Sophos data lake. This is a cloud repository that you can actually leverage to do investigations as well. So most XDR tools force users to waste time on incidents that should have been automatically blocked. Sophos combines XDR with the industry-leading best endpoint and server protection, and together they block the vast majority of threats before they require manual investigation. So we talked a little bit about MDR, and simply what it is MDR is managed detection and response. So we understand IT budgets are stretched, IT staff is stretched. And look at Sophos MDR as a staff augmentation solution with eyes on glass, and it really provides a couple of things. First of all, it's a proactive human-led threat hunting. It has a powerful threat detection using our XDR tools, and also a full incident investigation, response, and remediation. This is key. I don't know how many customers out there have a weekend staff, but we can go through a number of our case studies. And what we've seen is that initial attack or initial vectors occurred during off hours, always on the weekends, always after hours, when typically your IT staff is home and not not having their eyes on glass or actively on the network. A major principle of Sophos MDR is compatibility. So Sophos MDR meets you where you are. From people perspective, we can, from a process perspective, as well as a technology perspective. And we can take signals from across your environment, not just Sophos solutions as well. We have a plethora of integrations that we can pull into this as well from your existing firewall, that even if it's not a Sophos firewall, as well as other solutions too. And with the day-to-day customer experience is key. And this is why we're incredibly proud to be the highest rated and most reviewed vendor across MDR, endpoint, and firewall on Gartner's Peer Insights. That's an independent Gartner verified customer feedback. So we're very proud to be up there. We have a number of reviews there, so it's great. And then Sophos named a 2023 Customer Choice again for security endpoint. And this gives you an idea too, is that we've been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. This is the number of times that we've actually appeared in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. That's 13. That's well beyond anyone that's in that quadrant with us. We've been doing this for a while, and having the experience in there actually provides us another feather in our cap too. So if you're looking for next steps, you can actually access Sophos now and actually download a free trial, or contact us and let us know what we can do for your MDR needs. That's all I'm going to talk about today. I hope you found this session informational and educational. Thank you very much.